Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. As my wife has told you, we are shipping ice cream here through the holiday season. Make sure you're ordering your Taharka Brothers ice cream, taking your $15.70 off at checkout. Just click on the little thing where it says coupon code, put Baltimore Positive in, get it delivered to you. I highly recommend the peanut butter cup and the wake and bake, but my favorite has become the sweet potato crumble. I actually picked up an extra pint of that on Monday as they were mixing up the new eggnog flavor there and the peppermint bark. Make sure you go out to Baltimore Positive. All of our WNST sponsors, including Cole Roofing, our friends at Sporticulture, our friends at Costas, who are delivering crab cakes around the world. If you need to deliver some crab cakes, order them. Our friends at Costas do that, and they are delicious. I'm going to get some cream of crab soup and some crab imperial so I feel like a king. Felt like a king after a Tuesday night, Luke. It's not often we get Tuesday night football on the buffet, and yeah, I'm watching Howie Long and my buddy Jay Glazer and all them do the pregame show in Strahan, and lo and behold, they got this big feature on Dez Bryant. They're going to talk about Dez Bryant. It's incredible, Dez Bryant, and I think you and I have put about 2 words into Dez Bryant since he's been here, but you're playing the Cowboys, and he's number 88 and all that stuff. Then he pops positive. Then he goes out on Twitter. Then they run the piece. Then he retires. Then he unretires. Then he started drinking wine. Dez Bryant got more airtime than, maybe the orange guy running the country, at the beginning, and didn't play. I mean, the story all night was Dez Bryant on Twitter. And at the end of the day, he's not like all that big a factor here, but it certainly does. It sells T-shirts, doesn't it?
It does, and it gets people talking, and now a few more days of the Ravens holding their breath and hoping that all this contact tracing talk isn't 100% lip service. I think it's certainly some lip service based on how the first outbreak played out and what the initial comments were when they reopened the building after Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins were the first 2 tested positive. I guess McSorley, was the first one a couple days before that to go on the list. But
nobody's answered any questions. It's not like I'm saying, can you explain to us how the hell that happened last week in more than 3 paragraphs?
Right,
at some point the story will come out and the indictments will be there and all that. But in the meantime, they still got the bug, don't they?
Yeah, well, and it doesn't mean that this is related to that, because you're talking about how long the building was shut down. Community spread is very high right now. And that's where the league is trying to control as much as they can. And when I say the league, I mean not Roger Goodell and the powers that be. I mean everyone, players, coaches, organizations individually. They're trying to control the protocols as much as they can, knowing what the outside world is like right now and knowing how easily that can come into your building. And if guys aren't wearing masks and you're meeting in person and doing things you shouldn't be doing, then, well, you get a Ravens situation, you get a Titans situation. So, from that standpoint, you look at what happened, and, let me be very clear about this. Let's also remind ourselves what a close contact means. That doesn't mean you pass a guy in the hall and they're 2 feet away and that means you're a close contact. It means prolonged, sustained close contact, and then factor in masked or unmasked. Derek Wolfe was asked about this after the game, and John Harbaugh talked about trusting the science of contact tracing and what the league does there. And look, I don't put a whole lot of stock, not because John said it, but just because we know how that played out. But one thing Derek Wolfe did say, and this was what has been conveyed as part of the issue with the first outbreak, was the league, if you remember at that point, had gone into the more rigid, stricter protocol for masking in terms of meeting virtually, all those things. And the express sentiment is that happened after the Ravens outbreak had already started. But Derek Wolfe said, look, we've been masked all week. We're meeting on Zoom. The routine at this point is literally we are meeting on Zoom at home. We come in, practice, get out of the building, and then we're meeting virtually again. We're all wearing masks. We're all keeping our distance. And from his perspective, and look, I'm not going to say that Derek Wolfe speaks for the entire locker room, but he expressed confidence in them being able to play. I think for me, when you're talking about contact tracing, you're talking about the brace, the tracking bracelets that they wear and masks and all of that. I can buy I can try to buy contact tracing being completed in a timely manner from the Ravens side. But when you do have Dez Bryant out there, seeing old teammates, seeing old coaches, and again, the concept of viral load, and did he spend 15 minutes right next to someone, albeit talking about an outdoor setting? I can even buy ultimately there not being any close contacts. But what I won't buy is it was done that quickly and that effectively when you're talking about such a short, expedited timeline from the time that his PCR tests came back inconclusive. They gave him a point of care test, which is more immediate, but we also know does lend itself to not being as accurate. But for me, to and this isn't even to say that you absolutely had to cancel the game, but to just turn around and say, oh, we completed all of our contact tracing and everything's fine, when Dez Bryant was out on the field for an extended period of time. And that's not to say that he was sitting there talking to any individual for 10 or 15 minutes at a time, but he was just making his rounds. To not be extra cautious there and say, look, guys, we're in a rain delay, so to speak, to put it in baseball terms, to make sure we've got to figure this out, and we've got to look at Dallas, and we've got to make sure that he wasn't sitting there chatting with anyone for 10 minutes right next to that person. If he's just coming around, and look, I understand the optics of it. If
he came by and gave me a hug, I would feel like I needed to get tested if he popped 30. I would feel that way about anybody in any walk of life, right? Like if I passed somebody in the Wise Markets last week and I found out that they were in a cashier before me, I'd be like, I better go get tested. By the way, my wife got tested on Monday downtown. She got her test results back in the afternoon. Like she got her test results back in like 6 hours. Good. So, like getting tests back now, if you're a regular person, I just want to give a little confidence to people that you can go out and get tested. It certainly gave me a little bit. I have not been tested yet. I haven't touched anybody in 9 months, for crying out loud. But I wasn't hugging people on the sidelines, to Dez Bryant's point.
It's a bad look. There's no question about that. And certainly the recommendation is not to be doing that. However, I will remind everyone, when you go back to Cam Newton and the Patriots with their mini outbreak that they had, remember there was that famous still photo from the telecast of Patrick Mahomes giving a bro hug to Stephon Gilmore, who then tested positive. Everyone was flipping out saying, oh, is Mahomes going to test positive? He didn't. And there was no across the field transmission. Again, it's a bad look. I totally do not buy that the league did
by the way, they're in a different planet. I don't want to interrupt you, but I must. If you're bro-hugging people during this, F you. Shame on you. If you're bro-hugging, you're playing football. I get it. But there's no need. My wife can't hug her father. I can't hug my son, right? Like, you can't hug your mother. So, like, at this point, to be bro-hugging when there's millions of dollars at stake and you could dirty up the whole Cowboys team, and you had a semi-dirty test or a rain delay test, whatever you're going to call it, in the morning, you get a rain delay test, you don't give it to anybody else. I mean, I don't – that's common sense. But then again, this guy retired 5 minutes after the game started. So, 5 minutes after they tell me how mature he is, oh, it's new maturity. Yeah, he's out bro-hugging people when he popped maybe a dirty test.
Well, he didn't know that. Dez
Bryant, I'm done with Dez Bryant.
Okay, I'm not going to defend
Maybe felt like they were talking about a Cowboy all Tuesday night anyway,
I'm not going to defend the Twitter decorum, but he wasn't out there knowing that he had an inconclusive test. He was pulled from the field when they found out he had an inconclusive test. That's my understanding. Now, I haven't heard that directly because, well, we've talked about the lack of transparency and how national reporters in this league will find out things, and whether it's true or not, they're getting information from somebody or alleged information. So he wasn't going around bro-hugging people thinking that he had possibly tested positive. That's my point. And the other thing I will say, Dez Bryant's not the only one in the league doing that. I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm not saying that makes the optics look
that's
any
why
better.
They're getting dirty. You know what I mean? You're either following the rules or you're not. I didn't go into Pizza John's bro-hugging, Pizza John's crew.
That's not what's transmitting the virus, though. It's viral load. And look, I'm not saying they should be doing
6 feet,
that.
dog. 6 feet.
Let me
That's
be
what I
very
tell
clear
people
about that. let me be very clear about that. I'm not condoning that, but that is not what's transmitting the virus. Because if that were the case, then the entire league would have been shut down in week 3 because that's been happening every single week.
Well, I just hope the Cowboys aren't 30 a day and a half from now,
Sure.
because if they are, there's going to be hell to pay for everybody. In the same way that the Ravens players freaked out last week, and
Sure.
and their wives are sick, and they have to go home and tell their wives how the idiot trainer wasn't wearing a mask. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy.
Well, and that's where I will come back to. As much as I might sit here and say I'm not convinced that Dez Bryant, with the limited, quick interactions that he had with people, spread the virus, especially in an outdoor environment like that. But that said, I'm not remotely buying that the due diligence was done with the contact tracing on the Cowboys side. You might look at the Ravens side and say, okay, they've kept their distance. They're wearing their bracelets inside the building. They've been meeting virtually. They've been practicing, and that's it in terms of interactions at the facility. But you can't tell me that based on how long he actually was out on the field, and again, making his rounds and not necessarily talking to any one person for 20 minutes, but you can't tell me that they turned around that quickly and did all the contact tracing on the opposite side there and had full confidence that, okay, he didn't have anyone that needs to be pulled from the Dallas sideline, whether it's a coach, whether it's some scrub that's inactive, or someone who just plays on special teams. That's the part where you look at it and say that doesn't smell right.
Well, they're all getting back on a bus and getting back on a
right,
plane, flying back to Dallas in the middle of the night too, right? So,
but that's why it's so important to make sure that you didn't have a prolonged close contact experience. And then when you can see some of the Associated Press photos and some of the other photographers, there were a couple interactions where his mask was pulled down, and that looks even worse then.
Poor Ryan Mink has to take a tweet down because, Daddy says take the tweet down. We don't want to let anybody know, and then Don Van Noter retweets it, and we're taking tweets down now. I mean, that's just stupid. There's no other way. It's embarrassing is what it is.
Especially when other reporters were tweeting about it. And again, like I said, I have no idea, and I don't suspect that Dez was talking to any one individual for a long period of time where you would have from what I understand, the necessary viral load to transmit. But again, terrible look of just that happening, and then the league saying contact tracing's okay. It's fine. And then the question is, was he wearing even if he was wearing a bracelet, was Dallas, all those guys on the field from Dallas's side, were they wearing, the contact tracing bracelets? Again, even from a purely an optics standpoint, why not push back kickoff, really do your due diligence, really be thorough, and then you can even put out a statement that out of an excess amount of concern for our player safety, which we hear all the time and is such lip service. We get that. But there is a case where you'd actually say, at the very least, they pushed kickoff back 45 minutes to be extra careful. And guess what they did? They went overboard on making sure that there wasn't anyone that was interacting with Dez longer than a few moments. So, but the optics and what we were just talking about a week ago at this time, Wednesday afternoon football, and a game that had been postponed 3 times, and an outbreak with 23, 24 players on the COVID list, and assistant coaches and families. The optics. The league doesn't care about the optics at this point. We know that. If they did, that Thanksgiving game would have been pushed back once, and then after that moved to week 18 because how that played out. We know that was just below the bar in terms of trying to, look at things from a quality of play standpoint, from a player safety standpoint, from a health standpoint, all those things, and the product that we saw last Wednesday. So if that played out the way it did, I can't tell you that I was shocked that they played. I did think, at the very least, even if it was purely superficial optics, and it's not superficial. Let me retract that part of it. Even from an optics standpoint, though, push the game back and do some extra contact tracing. Right? Exactly. And that's the part where you look at it and say, look, I'm really trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I mean, it's a really bad look, and there's no question about it. And we're back in this position now where
Crossing our
They
fingers.
say the contact tracing. And there weren't high-risk close contacts. Well, we'll see what the tests look like. And here's the other thing, and let's also acknowledge this, because of, according to the report, he had an inconclusive PCR test, which that's the testing they do in the morning, and it comes back, for most teams, it comes back late that night or overnight. For the Ravens, because their lab is a little bit closer. I think their lab, I want to say their lab might be in, I'm not sure where exactly, so I don't want to speculate too much, but it's close. We know that much. So, and if you followed the initial outbreak, typically they would get test results somewhere in the neighborhood of 5:30, 6:30, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that timeline checks out in terms of Dez was out on the field quite early. I probably got in the press box shortly before 5:30, and it wasn't long after that Dez Bryant was out there. So he was out there very early. He was one of the first guys out there for either team. So test comes back inconclusive. At that point, they give a point of care test, which is a quicker return on the result, but it also has less accuracy. So I do want to throw out there, and I'm not saying I expect this, I'm not saying I've heard this. There have been cases of guys having inconclusive and having a false positive test. The best case scenario is that's what it ends up being. But at this point, certainly you can't treat it that way, and that's why he had to be pulled from the field, and that's why there's so much concern. Hoping and holding your breath and looking at what testing is going to look like for both the Ravens and the Cowboys over the next couple of days.
Dr. Lucas Jones reporting in here.
I'm not. I'm trying to learn as much as I can as
when
everyone
you're
else.
Talking, I started quoting you, the necessary viral load in order to get sick. Once you're starting doing that, I mean, you're pre-med. This is like Animal House, pre-med, pre-law.
And look, I'm just going off of what has been said about that. That doesn't mean that's an absolute, but that's why if you do happen to just, if you're in a grocery store and you hypothetically walk by someone in an aisle and that person finds out that they tested positive, from what I've seen from doctors, you don't have anything to worry about in that specific scenario. Now,
because you're wearing a mask and they're wearing a mask and you're 6 feet apart.
Correct. So I just want to, and look, I'm not saying this is gospel. I'm passing on things that I have read from medical opinions that I've seen. And look, there's still not a 100% consensus on stuff. That's why we need to be really careful. And that's why there is a lot of concern. And that's why I said,
I'm not going to Cleveland Monday.
And that's why even if you're in the position where they didn't have to necessarily cancel the game, push back kickoff and really make sure. And that's where I'm not buying that they were really sure that that the contact tracing was done.
They went with the Buck Showalter theory of, we got to get this one in. Let's get this one in, fellas. Let's got to get it in. Luke Jones is here. He's Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. Go ahead, Luke.
No, they had already canceled. They had already had to move it from last Thursday night to Tuesday night. So hey, we can't keep a national TV audience waiting any longer, right? Even though based on the ratings of what last Wednesday was, and you saw what the numbers were there, people will wait. NFL fans have proven over and over again they will wait. So they could have pushed the game back 45 minutes and done their due diligence.
They could have pretended it was a lightning storm, literally.
Yeah, they absolutely could have done that, and that's where I look at that and I say, I'm not saying I'm biased 100% on the Ravens side, but okay, at least they have some data and they know what the interactions were the last couple of days. They didn't have that as far as Dez interacting with anyone from the Cowboys, and that's where take an extra half hour, take an extra 45 minutes, and really make sure. And at the very least, even if you're sure, it still looks better from an optics
standpoint. Can you imagine
if
12 Cowboys pop positive on Friday and Dez Bryant infected them? Now, they're not a playoff team. That's part of why they made the Broncos run around without a quarterback. They're like, you suck with a quarterback. You can suck without a quarterback, right? But they almost beat the Chiefs the other day. But I would say for the league, why would they want the optics of waking up Friday morning and having the Cowboys infected by their former player? That is a scandal upon all. But they sort of love scandal, though. I mean, the whole notion that they turned the pregame show over to Dez Bryant, even when he popped positive, and he became the halftime sensation and, what he's tweeting and what everybody else is tweeting. Dude, he barely is a member of the team. He doesn't even own a place here. He lives in a hotel room. It's crazy, Luke Jones is here. We're talking football and epidemiology and where we are with the Browns on Monday night and whether the league really cares about its players or not. I guess the larger picture in all of this is what it does mean to the whole league in the next month or so as to every day for every coach. You mentioned this 5:30, 6 o'clock, the batch of tests comes back. That's 32 deep across the league right now for every coach, for every Dez Bryant walking around, ask Patton before a game, visiting with old friends, all of that. That's going to be top of mind for everybody here the next month because for me, the level of play in the league has gone down in the last couple of weeks. I think this is getting heavy on all the organizations for all of the above. When Dez Bryant says, I pop 30, I quit, I think probably a lot of guys on 3 and 10 teams that feel that way right now.
Yeah, I don't know if I share your sentiment quite as much on the quality of play. I mean, certainly the Denver and the Ravens-Steelers examples notwithstanding, but overall, I'm not so sure about that.
I thought the game stunk over the weekend for the most part. Well, Monday night was better, but yeah.
Yeah, but we that happens sometimes also. But one thing I think is interesting, and I'll go back to a point that you made earlier in the conversation, is this the smoking gun to have the league really crack down on those pre and post game interactions? And look, they should, and that's not to say that going up and especially players are wearing gloves in pregame warmups, they give each other a fist tap. Do I think that's the riskiest behavior compared to being in the locker room, compared to meeting rooms, compared to cafeteria, compared to training room, compared to the weight room? No, I don't. But if you're really trying to be serious about mitigating as much as possible and limiting cases as much as possible. And what's kind of ironic about what happened with Dez Bryant was it had been a calmer week for the league in terms of this week leading into Tuesday night's game compared to what the Ravens were dealing with, and even Pittsburgh having some positives. Not to say there weren't any, but there had been a reduced number, and the league even had there was even a conference call about that a couple days ago, talking about the numbers had been fewer positive cases over that given week compared to the previous 3 or 4 weeks. So, but when you see that, you do wonder if the league puts out a mandate over the next couple of days and says, look, no interacting with the other team. The 50-yard line is a barrier, so to speak. You each get your half of the field for pregame warm-ups. You can come out early and catch passes, whatever you're doing, do some jogging, agility work. And you see guys doing that. And you even see guys that are injured and, doing some rehab work, so to speak. Calais Campbell a few weeks back was doing that before the Titans game. So you have guys out on the field. That's not to say that you forbid them from going out on the field. And frankly, it's better to have guys out on the field than they're all hanging out in the locker room before the game. If you're talking, trying to truly be safe here. But you do wonder if a memo gets sent out and says, guys, you can't interact with each other before the game. We just can't. We can't have it. You're going to get fined because we have video. There's cameras. The eye in the sky doesn't lie, and we're going to fine you. So look, you can wave to them. You can shout out hello from 15 yards away, but can't have you going up to each other, and certainly can't have a player pulling his mask down as Dez Bryant was photographed. And look, he's not the only one who's done that this year. Let's be very clear about that. I don't want to pick on him too much, but I do wonder if this will kind of be the impetus for cracking down on those kind of interactions, and in turn after the game, you don't have to go up and hug everyone, and it's just the reality right now. Text each other, FaceTime with each other. I mean that's just where we are right now, and look. It's not as though I think that's the riskiest behavior, but if you're truly trying to reduce the risk as much as possible, every tiny little bit helps. And again, even from strictly an optics standpoint, to your point, because people aren't fist bumping and hugging each other. And
dude, I was at Pizza John's on Tuesday night at 6:30 picking up pizza. I grabbed a pizza for my son, and I dropped it off in Dundalk, and he gave me a beer, and I gave him a pizza, and he's wearing gloves and we're extending it out of the car. I'm not fist bumping my kid. You know what I mean? Like, that's why when I see this stuff, like the clown running the country talking about, well, it's a Christmas party. We all take masks off. No, we don't, you moron. And that's why Dez Bryant shouldn't be doing what he did the other night. And I would think the league is going to crack down. I mean, I would think, the optics aside, they don't want canceled games. And I was going to bring this up with you. I don't know if you heard, Peter King was on the program this week, and I ran it, and I may still run it in the aftermath of the game because it was great information, that he talked about the league being very, very concerned about television and moving games and screwing with TV. Even though they get Bonzer ratings and all that, they played a 3:30 game last week as a lead up to a tree, right? Last week, they don't want NBC and ESPN and Fox and CBS to be running around ripping their programming apart because they're paying too much money. They are the client, and that lies at the back of all of this, is that it's not really about Roger and Jera. It's about the TV people paying the bills. And that's where their grave concern is in pushing games, moving games, having Thanksgiving night wind up being a Wednesday afternoon game. Whole different thing when you bought Black Friday advertising with the league on Thursday night and didn't get it.
Yeah, very fair. And I mean, that's a message that needs to be conveyed to all parties involved, including coaches and players who kind of live in this, and we kind of joked about this a little bit with, but we kind of we talked about this as far as what happened Sunday, where, they moved practice from outside to inside at the last second, local media, sorry guys, sorry you wasted your Sunday. We don't care. But there's that insulated world where they're all about football, but it's that reminder that this is an entertainment business. Inherently, a bunch of grown men playing football has zero value inherently, if no one's watching it. So that's where, to your point, because of the value of the TV contracts and what that means for the league, and what has transformed this into a multi-billion-dollar operation every year, it's TV, and that's a message that, frankly, Dick Cass and other team presidents and other executives around the league need to be conveying to players and coaches, because it's like, look, guys, if it's not for NBC or it's not ESPN or CBS or Fox, you're not making Patrick Mahomes. You're not making $50 million a year. Matthew Judon, you're not making $16 million a year. Mark Andrews, that
for $1 million a week. Matthew Judon got $1 million check for showing up on Tuesday, and if they had shut the game down last week, if they had forfeited the game, Matthew Judon would have forfeited $1 million. So that's the standard for where this is. And if you make $1.7 million, you forfeited $100,000. So figure out anywhere between $1.7 million and $17 million and do the math on it. That's what it costs if you don't play.
It's wherever you fall on that scale, it's a lot of money to you. So, but that's where some of the messaging from a league standpoint, from an organization standpoint, comes in and says, guys, this isn't about being inconvenienced trying to play the Steelers. This is about your livelihood. This is about all of our livelihoods here.
And your health, by the way, and the health of your family members.
And long-term ramifications for this, to your point, as far as wanting to keep the networks happy and understanding how ever-evolving TV and sports and entertainment is. I mean, how does terrestrial TV and cable TV morph into streaming? I was just reading an article about that the other day, as far as ESPN versus ESPN Plus. I mean, there's a lot, and that's not, look, it's the NFL. It's going to be very, very appealing, but anything you do to harm that is something at the negotiating table that networks can say, well, wasn't really happy about that. And look, it might be the difference of $0.1 billion at the end of the day, but that's still $100 million there. So I mean, it's a big deal. So to them, and I know people listening right now, we're all just kind of scratching our head because we don't live in that kind of world. But there's a lot of money at stake, and that's why they're playing in the first place, bringing it back kind of full circle. But it's certainly that has to be part of the messaging if you're the league wanting to get this thing to the finish line with any semblance of credibility between now and whenever they ultimately play the Super Bowl, whether it's on time or whether it ends up, inevitably having to be pushed back a couple weeks.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. I want to give a shout-out to Leonard Raskin and our friends at Raskin Global, as well as our friends at Blondell Miller Schuler. You'll be hearing from Todd and Leonard this week. Dennis Colatzos will be dropping by. Bill Cole from Cole Roofing will be dropping by and doing the aftermath of Cowboys-Ravens as we get ready for Monday night in the land of Cleve. Also doing some great conversations on the Baltimore Positive side. Max White's going to be joining us. Several Chamber of Commerce folks here. We talk so much about shopping locally, taking care of local people. We talk about our local ice cream at Taharka and our local crab cakes at Fadley's. Make sure you're shopping local. We're going to be having some local people on talking about the importance and the significance of small business right here in Baltimore. I think we all can get on board with that before the holidays. I am Nestor. He is Luke. Find us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and everywhere you are. You can email me anytime, anywhere, ness@baltimorepositive.com. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore Ravens and Baltimore Positive.